Welcome to lecture number 6, our final lecture, entitled Restoring the Constitution, Taking Effective Action. All the education that we've gone through in the last 5 lectures really comes down to now, what are we going to do with it? Is it just to be more knowledgeable, or is it to actually help restore the Constitution? Where I want to begin today, a brief rehearsal again of the state of our nation. I think we've clearly shown that we're not using the Constitution anymore. And if we were, it would solve the majority of the problems our nation is facing today. I'll use just one example we've used previously, one of my favorites, Congressman Pete Stark of California, who, surprisingly, very openly admitted his view that in this country, the federal government can do pretty much whatever it wants to. We don't have limited government anymore. Today, the federal government really does whatever they want to, whatever they feel they can get away with. So, again, a brief review. We talked about the dangers of democracy, the enumerated powers, and how important it is that we understand what was actually authorized by the Constitution and what is not. We understand the dangers of the Federal Reserve System, which was never authorized by the Constitution and gives tremendous power to private hands. And we understand the limits on our war powers on the federal level, and the neoconservative movement with their attempt to misuse war powers against us and against other nations. And then in the last lecture, we went into the enemies of freedom. It's essentially we understand those who are intentionally working to overthrow liberty from both political parties, as well as their representation in the schools, both public schools and colleges, media, and the money powers and how they control things as well. It's important to understand the enemies. So today, how do we restore the Constitution with all this in mind? Robert Welch, the founder of the John Birch Society back in 1970, demonstrated the dangers of ineffective action. He says, there has been plenty of energy, enthusiasm, and money expended by patriotic Americans to have stopped the enemy several times over. Most of it, however, has actually and cleverly been shunted off course or guided into support of the very things the enemy wanted to accomplish. During the time the John Birch Society has been around, we have seen thousands and thousands of freedom groups come and go with many different plans of how to restore the Constitution or whatever else. There has been plenty of energy expended in the cause. Unfortunately, most of it has been ineffective, largely because we don't first identify what's causing the problem. We need a proper diagnosis. If you were to go into the doctor, tell him you're not feeling well, and before you say another word, and without ever giving you a checkup, he simply says, you need this prescription, have a nice day. I don't think I would take that prescription. I'd be a little leery, because he has no idea what's wrong with us. In the same way, we can't prescribe a solution to our nation's ailments unless we understand what is the root of the problem. So what is the root of the problem? Is any one of these people? Sometimes I have people acting as though Obama is the root of the problem, or Bush, or whoever. Well, clearly if it was George Bush, he's no longer in office, our problems are solved. If it was Obama, once his terms are over, problem solved. And that would also imply that we didn't have a problem before him. Clearly that's not true. These problems have existed for decades and decades. We just accounted over the last 100 years' history, actually, in lecture number 5, of serious problems infiltrating in our own government. The root of the problem is none of these. In fact, those of the ones on this page that we're electing to various offices are merely symptoms of the problem. I would point out, for example, that Nancy Pelosi is an excellent representative of her people. She represents their views. That's why she keeps getting elected. She is merely a symptom of the type of mentality of politics in her district, as is every congressman or senator. They represent those that are willing to support them and elect them. So the problem really isn't them, it's us. Those who are electing these people that are destroying our freedom. I think this is best illustrated by a man by the name of Alexis De Tocqueville. He came to America in the early 1800s to discover what was the secret of America's overnight, miraculous strength and success. what we often would refer to as the miracle of America. That in just a few decades, we became a world power, economically, militarily. As he traveled around America, he discovered some very interesting things. He said that in America, the people are free to do all kinds of things that are illegal in Europe, and yet they don't do them. That we are self-restraining. That we don't need government to tell us what we can or cannot do. And he pointed to the cause of that was the role that religion played in all of our lives here in America. That religion, without having any formal ties to politics, guided the philosophy and the morals of our political structure. It was very interesting to him the way it played such a role. He also noted that principles of liberty and the Constitution were preached from the pulpit in the churches. Because of that, one quote here from him, he says that in America, every citizen is taught the history of his country and the leading features of its Constitution. Well, that sounds like today, doesn't it? Yeah. I wish. He goes on to say it's extremely rare to find a man imperfectly acquainted with all these things. And a person wholly ignorant of them is sort of a phenomenon. Virtually everyone you talk to is thoroughly versed on the Constitution. To find one man that isn't, it's a phenomenon. It's bizarre. Today, if I were to apply his statement to today, I'd have to reverse this. Today, it's extremely rare to find a man who's vaguely acquainted with the Constitution and our national history. And a person wholly educated on them is sort of a phenomenon. If that was the great strength of America in the early 1800s, that is the great weakness of our country today. Because of that, I declare that we will never restore liberty to this country until we first restore the principles of liberty to the hearts and minds of the people. That, in its simplest form, is the solution. We must restore those principles of liberty to the hearts and minds of the people, so again we establish the type of society that Tocqueville described. That is the solution. Now, with that understanding, I want to analyze a few proposals that various freedom groups have brought forward as here's how we can help restore liberty. Term limits, for example. Let's compare back and forth a society as Tocqueville described versus a society on the opposite end of the spectrum, one that's thoroughly indoctrinated in socialism. In a society that's thoroughly indoctrinated in socialism, which we're almost there, what would term limits do for us? They would simply guarantee our faster turnover of our socialist leaders. It wouldn't make any difference in the quality of leadership. They would all be socialists because that's what we would elect. In a society as Tocqueville described, term limits would take away the best from us. When you have a rare one like a Washington, a Jefferson, a Madison, or someone like that, they would be term limited out and we wouldn't be able to have them continue to serve us. We'd have to settle for the average, the mediocre. So in neither case do term limits help us. The next one, a balanced budget amendment. In a society dedicated to socialism, balanced budget amendments means higher taxes. It doesn't mean it's going to restrain the government in any way. It just means higher taxes. And if we were truly following the Constitution again today, we wouldn't need a balanced budget amendment because the unbalanced budget is already unconstitutional. We covered previously that it would trim the federal government by at least 80%. We would have a budget surplus. Completely unnecessary. The next one, any other amendment proposals? The real danger here is that the amendment proposals always end up saying, well, Congress will never pass this amendment, so we need to pursue an amendments convention. And that's a very dangerous place to begin. I don't dare open the Constitution for revision in today's political climate, nor is there any need to do so. What about getting the right candidate elected? Now, this is not a bad thing to be involved in, don't get me wrong. I highly encourage you to support the candidates you feel will best support liberty. But if that's all we do, we are truly getting the cart before the horse. Because if we get the right candidate elected, if they're true to their oath of office and adhere to the Constitution, if the public does not understand those principles, the media will have an easy time destroying them prior to their re-election. They'll serve one term and be done and make very little difference. If, on the other hand, we have a society that understands those principles, getting someone like that elected becomes very easy. So again, it's a good thing to be involved in, but we first must lay the foundation. This next line is one I'm quite fond of. Militant revolt, tax evasion, revolution. Let's all grab our guns, just march on Washington, kick the bums out. Now that's a very bad idea. First of all, because even if we were to amass thousands of people ready to march on Washington with our arms, before you arrive, you would be met by the military, and they would put down your insurrection. In fact, interestingly, that's exactly what it says in Article 1, Section 8, that Congress has the duty to suppress insurrections. They'd be following the Constitution when they stopped us. But not only that, with all of these, whether it's tax evasion or revolution or whatever it is, none of those would ever work unless we first had educated enough people to understand the problems and be willing to take that level of extreme action. Because unless we have a major portion of society behind that movement, we're just an insurrection. And it'll be put out like a candle. No big deal. Now, wait a minute. The only way for these to work is if we first educate a major portion of society? Well, if we have educated a major portion of society, we've already won. We don't need our bullets at that point. We have a ballot. We can win that way. So again, none of those really help us in any way. The one thing I want you to remember, any idea that's ever brought before you on here's how we can save the Constitution, restore liberty, always ask this question. Does it address the root of the problem? Does it create an informed electorate? If it doesn't do that, we will never restore liberty to an ignorant public. It can't be done. So, Thomas Jefferson. Just to back up what I had to say, I have to call on one of my favorite founding fathers. He says, educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. Couldn't say it better myself, so I'll let him say it. The solution is proper education. So how do we do that? How do we properly educate? Well, as I said before, we have to first educate ourselves. We can't lift someone to higher ground unless we're on that higher ground. Educate ourselves, and then we educate our community. Now, specifically, again, quoting from Sun Tzu, as I mentioned in the last lecture, he gave us this great advice that we need to know your enemies and know yourself. So these are the things that we need to be educating our public, our community on. We need to understand the principles of liberty and help others understand it as well. We need to understand the enemy and help others understand that as well. So, how do we re-educate the public? The main theme here is we need to build influence. You want to do everything you can to build your influence. Staying away from the speculative theories helps with that. You don't want to lose influence. In every way, gradually building influence with those around us. I'll give you a few examples. We talked about in the last lecture the example of when I went around door to door handing out cards and just inviting people to read it and then let their state legislator know how they felt about it. I didn't tell them, you need to call and tell your senator to vote against this bill or vote for this bill or whatever. I let them decide. I just provided the information very passively. And virtually all of them called in saying, vote for this bill, we must have this marriage amendment. That process is a very good instruction that as we share information with those around us, which do you think would work better? If I came to you with an article and said, you really need to read this article because it will straighten you out. You are so confused on this topic, and this will set you straight. That might offend you. It did offend me. If, on the other hand, I came to you with an article and I said, Jack, I really appreciate your opinion. I'd love it if you would read through this article and let me know how you feel about it. I'd like to get your opinion on it, or something like that. How much more likely would you be to read an article where someone is asking for your opinion on it? Much more. It's a very passive approach. Unfortunately, I see that many times when people become aware of how far off track our nation has gone, they become fired up and full of enthusiasm. They want to grab their neighbor by the lapels and shake them and wake them up too. And that leads to frustration. They want to bang them over the head or whatever. And I've tried that, I admit it. I've tried to wake people up on my schedule. Frustrates them, frustrates me. If, on the other hand, we just share information with people on a passive basis, allowing them to come along at their own pace, some will love it, they'll embrace it, they'll want more. Others will seem pretty indifferent. That's okay. Just on a passive basis, share something with them from time to time. Eventually something may spark. Even the most committed liberal or socialist can be turned around with a passive sharing of information over time. In some cases, it might take a few years. That's okay. Let them come at their own schedule, not yours. That's one of the key factors in building influence. Now, the next thing I want to show is how to win elections. Congressman Larry McDonald, his history is very interesting. He first ran for U.S. Congress in 1972, but he lost. He ran as a Democrat, and he didn't do really any of the typical campaigning. He didn't see all the yard signs around and that type of thing. What he did instead was exactly what I'm doing. He went from community to community teaching the principles of the U.S. Constitution, and then organizing teams in those communities to continue sharing that information while he's gone. He began an educational effort across his congressional district. Now, he ran again in 1974, and this time he won because the people began to understand the principles of liberty. Then again, he was reelected in 76, 78, 80, and 82. And each time he gained a larger and larger margin. The reason being, the education continued. Each time they tried to take him out, running different people against him, he won even easier. When the people are educated on the principles of liberty and the Constitution, propaganda, media working against you, doesn't matter. Now, a few interesting details about him. He was a strict constitutionalist. Yes, even the Democrats can be strict constitutionalists. And he was one. He's one that always would look to the Constitution first before voting. Can I find in the Constitution the authority for this bill? No matter how much I like the bill, if it's not in there, I have to vote against it. That was his mantra. In addition to that, in 1983, he was appointed as the chairman of the John Birch Society, and of course received even more attacks because of that. But what he did to win elections is a very simple process. Educate, and then the people will easily elect you. That is how to get constitutionalists into office. Now, what we've discovered, Oklahoma in the last few years has started working the same process. And Oklahoma has transitioned from being a very, very liberal state. In their past history, they have never had a Republican majority in their state Senate, ever. And only between 1920 and 1921 did they have a Republican majority in their state House. Today, Oklahoma is looked at as one of the conservative leaders in our nation. They have a over 70% Republican majority in their House and Senate, and most of their U.S. congressmen, their governor, and so on. What happened? Education. Now, keep in mind, of course, just shifting from Democrat to Republican doesn't necessarily mean any change at all. I think we've amply covered that in previous lectures. But in this case, if you look at the type of legislation that's coming out of Oklahoma, they have definitely taken a strong stand for liberty and the Constitution. People today that know what Oklahoma is are surprised to learn what Oklahoma was. I went to Oklahoma a few years ago, met with some of these fine gentlemen who are some of the activist leaders that created this revolution, this turnaround. And what they taught me was very revealing. One of the things they taught me was what I call the power of 500. That in any congressional district in our country, when you can pull together a team of 500 to educate their communities, that's sufficient to restore constitutional understanding and turn that congressional district around. Whether your congressional district is one like Nancy Pelosi's, that one might take a few more years. But even there, they're not fools, they're just misinformed. And proper information can root out bad information in any district. 500. Now this is a DVD that recently came out by the John Birch Society explaining a little bit more of the details of how this Power of 500 works. It's part of a 6-lecture DVD set for training new members of the John Birch Society on how to be effective activists. I highly recommend it. Yeah, of course, it's me on the video, so couldn't be that bad. But here's the key elements. In order to be part of this team of 500, you must be well trained. We need to understand the principles of liberty. We need to understand the enemy. And we need to understand what is effective action. How we can get information out into the hands of our friends and neighbors in a manner that is not offensive, in a manner that is influential. How we can build influence with key people in our community. And that effort must be coordinated in a very focused effort. When I say coordinated, I mean not just locally, but nationally. That last year, and this year as well, we're seeing national efforts to create support in every state legislature for calling for a constitutional convention or an amendments convention. In order to defeat that, as we have continued to do so year after year, it needs to be a coordinated effort around the entire nation. We've also defeated in years past an effort to nationalize our police force. Well, that effort is being revived again today because, again, they're trying to create a national police force so that our police are no longer answering to the communities they serve, they answer to the federal government. It doesn't take much of an imagination to see the dangers of that. The only way any of this is possible is if it's coordinated across the whole country. Battles that are across your whole state would need to be coordinated in your state. For that reason, the John Birch Society hires coordinators all across the country, state by state, congressional district by congressional district, to coordinate those efforts that need to be done on the local level or on the state level or on the national level. And then lastly, it must be done in a manner that can reach beyond the choir. The choir is those I refer to that do come out to educational events. When you host a class on the Constitution, the ones that show up are usually the same faces you see at any event. You recognize them. And if we only reach out to them, it's always a very small portion of society, and that's not enough to turn the next election, is it? But if we instead can reach outside the choir and start having an expanding influence into the community, that's where we start turning the minds back to the Constitution, and we start turning elections towards candidates that will support the Constitution. Those are the key elements that must be included. And again, in the Power of 500, we'll go into some more detail on that. Lastly, it's important to understand what we're against. We're fighting against an enemy that is well organized, very much like a well-seasoned army. Though they are few, they are very effective because they are so organized. On the other hand, within the freedom movement, we're very much like Lone Rangers. Because we love our independence so much, we tend to be very independent and not join. I hear it so often, I'm not a joiner. I don't care if you're not a joiner. Would it be worth joining if you could save your country? Because that's really what's at stake here. I'm willing to join if that's what it takes. If I need to join up with others and work in a coordinated fashion, anyone that has any military experience understands the difference in power between a bunch of Lone Rangers and a well-organized military front. When it's orchestrated together, far more powerful. And we will never defeat the enemy running around independently. So, the Power of 500. The question I'm often asked is, can we really win? I'm sure that question was asked of George Washington in his day as well. And they, against very astonishing odds, did win. The only question I have is, will you take action? I know that we can win. The only question is, will enough people stand up, join together in a coordinated effort to restore liberty? If the answer to that is yes, then we will win. I have no doubt. And so with that, I invite you to help us build teams of 500. Build a team of 500 in your congressional district, because then we will win. You worry about your community and your congressional district. Let the others take care of themselves, because you can restore liberty in your district by helping build that team of 500. Thank you very much. May God bless America.
Very good. John is passing out some flyers here for you. I like these. These are easy for me to do. These are called fill in the blanks. I love fill in the blanks. So I decided I'm going to pass out a fill in the blank. We'll just go over these real fast, and then we'll try to give you some things that you can apply. You can see people in the community doing certain things, and we're going to bring them up. But again, it was called Restoring the Constitution Through Taking Effective Action. And the government will do whatever it thinks it can get away with. And if it can't get away with it, it's because we stand against it. And it's that simple. I've learned that much, right? And so we've been active at putting constitutionalists on boards in this community. Mark Junick up here, he's up on the senior board. And we have Mandy Stewart, who is on the library board. And we have another one. Refresh my memory. Who else? We got one more on another board. Anyway, none of us.
Drawing a blank.
Drawing a blank. Anyway, you're on a board, right?
I'm not on the fire board.
You're on the fire board. Yeah. Yes. So this is what we need on the boards. We need constitutionalists. And thank the Lord, this is happening in our community. And education is very, very important. We've got to educate people on the Constitution. And it's not easy. It's very difficult. I understand that. But one of the last things he said was that a lot of times we're preaching to the choir. Even these classes, we come together, but it's mostly with not with new people. It's with people that have been coming. And we're glad you're coming. But the way to get to the nation and to our community is to get the word out to other people. And so that might be a good time to start inviting people to come. Mm-hmm. I want to go over this De Tocqueville quote. I believe it was very, very important. And you can fill in the blanks as we go along here. Just yell it out, somebody, as soon as we get to the blank. It says, in the early 1800s, Alexis De Tocqueville identified the source of America's great strength, declaring, every citizen is taught the
Constitution.
I heard it over here. History. And what else? The leading features of his Constitution. Right. It is extremely rare to find a man imperfectly acquainted with all these things, and a person who wholly ignorant of them is sort of a phenomenon. Well, it wasn't with me for a number of years, I can tell you that. I wasn't a strict constitutionalist. I didn't know hardly anything about the Constitution. But America needs changing. And in that Constitution, I see what the Founding Fathers wanted us to see, to take a stand. So we have to, they said in the video, we have to understand the root of the problem. And how do we address the root of the problem? And that is that we have an uninformed electorate. And again, I could say I was one of them, very uninformed. I would just vote for people by name recognition, and or who I know, or who was, how many of you did this? Well, he's such a nice guy. And then we found out differently, didn't we? Yeah, so we have to go to the root of the problem. It has to be strictly constitutional. And then number 3, what solution will address the root of the problem? And here's what Thomas Jefferson counseled. He said, number 1, educate and inform the whole mass of people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. It's not term limits, right? It's not. Because if it's term limits, then we might get a good guy out in 4 years that we want to keep in there, right? So none of these quick fixes. And then finally, number 4, to restore liberty in any congressional district, it simply takes a team of how many? 500. Amen. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a team of 500 in this community that just went out and just went wild and were just strict constitutionalists? I would like to do something here because I really believe it falls in line with what we watched tonight. What was it, Tuesday, we went to the county commissioners. And as you know, we're working to get the pornographic books out of the library. But Troy McEwen had a interesting, I wonder if you would come up, if you could do this in 5 minutes, can you do this in 5 minutes? And just share what you said to the county commissioners.
Yeah.
Or less.
Or less. But I know you're going to take at least 5. Could you
It was
just
good.
come on up? It was good. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. County commissioners gave me 3, and 25 minutes later I was sitting down. But that was their fault.
We're not as nice as they are, though.
Basically, they're looking at building an industrial park, 8 shovel-ready sites. They want to use your tax dollars to do it. They want to spend $12 million on it. These sites are not sold. It's a pipe dream. They want to use what I like to call pennies from heaven, federal funding. They've done none of the research on what the strings attached to it or what it's going to cost. Their argument was, we wanted Weatherby, and we didn't get it, so everybody's upset. If anybody's upset with county commissioners about not chasing Weatherby down, it's because they didn't educate anybody involved in it. Sheridan spent almost $30 million to get Weatherby in. $30 million. It provides about 70 to 90 jobs, the last time I checked. That's $750,000 per job. And if you take the amount of revenue that place is going to generate, it's going to take a minimum of 150 years to pay it back. We won't even be shooting guns. And my last point to him was, we, as elected officials, don't belong in economic development.
Mm-hmm.
We don't belong in business development. And we certainly don't belong in property development with other people's money, because it will go nowhere.
Very good.
Thank you for your time.
You used a word on them that I liked. Do you remember what it was? It starts with an S. You said you can't, this is somethingism.
Oh. In the article that I read, and that was a good point. Can't believe I don't remember that. One of the county commissioners wants to get all the cities and counties together and coordinate a statewide effort to spend federal money.
Mm-hmm.
That's a statewide economy. That is the definition of socialism.
Who is this? Name names.
Not the dilapidated gong.
Okay.
Bell.
Bell.
It had rust on it?
Yeah. It was a good day, I thought.
I'd never even heard of this, and I usually do whatever was going on.
And another
Did they
shocker
split it
is
into the-
County 17 actually covered it. Of course, the news record didn't, but probably for the first time ever, they pretty much quoted me and my intent perfectly. I guess that was going to cause enough trouble to get people excited.
Dr. Sheridan, you said $300 million, was that
30.
$30 billion? Was that the cash or was that the infrastructure? Because didn't Sheridan build that whole fancy exit and
Yes.
entrance? Was that part of the $3 million or was that other money from someplace else?
I'm headed into dangerous waters now, aren't I?
You can have an extra minute.
Well, they paid for a lot of the infrastructure, and that was, and I got to figure it out because I got them flipped in my mind. I used to know, but now I'm confused sometimes. Doesn't take much. I think they put $17 million into infrastructure, preparation, bringing utilities, sewer, water, and everything out to the site and getting it shovel ready. And then in the background, there was a $13 million trade. And I want to say, well, I'm going to say it because it's really what it is. They gave him a $13 million tax break. But they can't do that constitutionally, according to the Constitution of Wyoming. So they've worked their ways around it with trades and deals and everything. Basically, we're going to give you enough stuff so you have enough money to pay the taxes. Now, and then we don't have to call it tax break. Next session's going to be a hoot. They're trying to put on a special session. I already got a bill almost ready to go if they do on the mask mandates in schools. I have a bill we just about finished up. Takes all rights away from school districts. They can't have anybody vaccinated against anything. They can't make kids wear masks. They can't do whatever they want to do anymore. Now it'll come out of the drawer maybe, and then it'll be interesting. So if you want to have some fun, watch either the special session or the next session. Could be quite similar to House Bill 80 or Senate File 80, which turned into House Bill 127.
When is the special session?
They're looking,
Waiting for the governor right now.
doing some research too. One last point.
What was the answer on the date of the?
There is no date. The governor is contemplating calling it himself. If he does not call it, the Senate has the votes to call it. The House may have the votes, and then it'll take at least 2 weeks to get it put together, to get the votes. But if the governor calls it, it could happen immediately.
Would you give those bill numbers again, please?
The former bill numbers was Senate File 80 and House Bill 127.
Okay, thanks.
The one I'm working on hasn't been numbered yet. Bill Fortner has a bill in to make all vaccine passports and mandatory vaccines illegal.
Didn't they just table that one somehow, or did I read that, or? I guess I don't remember the verbiage. Someplace where it won't come out of.
They're guessing it'll stay in the drawer,
Okay.
but if we get out in front of it in enough time, we actually forced a few of them out of the drawer. We got one of them into law, not signed into law. And it was about 2/3 of what we wanted. And then there's one last bill going in that nobody in the state of Wyoming, public or private, can discriminate against anybody for not having a vaccine. So if you work for me and I say you have to have a vaccine to stay here, you will have grounds to sue me for improper termination.
Now, is there anything to allude to that on the state level, for the state government also?
That's where we're doing it at.
Okay. So the state can't discriminate against you.
And we can blame our predecessors. I've been down to Shine a couple times doing a little bit of research. The buggers before we got there are the ones that passed legislation that has given the governor tons and tons of power. It was about 6 years ago. It's ridiculous. So we're looking at how do we get around that.
Just a question, Troy, do you see, I mean, how far do you see this going with the mandatory vaccines and stuff?
As far as we'll let it.
Yeah, I think we have a chance to stop it. We have one good thing working for us. A few of us are not very quiet. We actually ended up in many newspapers across the state and the country, and we will again, and it's an election year. So if they don't bring it out of the drawer, we have a way to get it out of the drawer.
If they're forcing the hospital to vaccinate and refusing to pay Medicare because of unvaccinated people, I mean, that's a federal level forcing basically a local entity.
That was the crux of the issue that I was trying to make with the county commissioners. It's time we get off the government teat. It's all the stuff attached to it. We're like crack addicts after federal funding. And in most cases, we don't need it.
So is that what this industrial park is, the money attached to that, the federal, I guess the federal ruling, or what do they have attached to that money that they the way you spend it?
It's coming out of the ARPA funds,
Okay.
so there will be environmental stuff attached to it. There will be taxes, federal taxes attached to it. One other last thing, you guys keep bringing up so many good questions and points. The infrastructure bill, $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Everybody's like, who's going to get us out of the woods? Well, hidden in that bill is a federal road usage charge. Hidden in that bill is a federal gas tax. Hidden in that bill is a plan to toll road every interstate. And that's not even the bad part. Later in the bill is a corporate income tax.
Didn't they give Buttigieg $50 million to figure out how to tax every mile on your vehicle?
Yes.
To come up with a plan on how to tax every mile.
And they gave Nancy Pelosi's husband hundreds of $1 millions to build a tunnel through a mountain that doesn't exist. We can save, I believe we can save Wyoming. I don't know about the rest of the country, but I think we can save the state. We just got to go down and start fighting.
You know, the thing is, too, is that, you know, as much as you're doing, it's all of us. We have to open our mouths. We really do.
So it would be beneficial if we sent emails to the governor, our governor, and said, you need to call this special session so we can vote on a nullification bill, basically.
It will be one subject. He's already said that he will veto anything other than a subject specifically about mandates. So we're trying to get it as wide as mandates, which then would cover, you could have a bill on mask mandates, you could have a bill on vaccine mandates. So there could be 3 to 5 bills that come out of it. One that makes it discriminatory to terminate someone. That way we can make sure that unemployment benefits go to someone who gets terminated for not being vaccinated. We would need one that there are many levels of how we deal with the vaccine mandates in different entities. By the way, the state government, the governor gave an executive order that the state government will not accept or enforce vaccine mandates or passports. So that's already in effect via an executive order, but it really needs to be codified in law, and that's what we need to do. So if, November 1st is when Banner Health is going to start requiring these. There's plenty of other companies lined up. Some have already started. On the reservations, they've already fired teachers that weren't willing to vaccine mandate or get vaccinated, and they fired nurses and doctors. So it's happening already, but we've got to do this quickly. No later than November 1st, we have to have a law passed. So the fastest way and the only way we can make November 1st right now is if the governor called the session. If we do it any other way, it's highly unlikely we'd have it done before Banner Health enacted their mandate.
What about informed consent in Nuremberg? It's against federal law to do what they're doing. Informed consent, where they neither inform people nor do they require their consent.
Yeah, I think that needs to be codified in law as part of the, if we don't completely outlaw them, prohibit vaccine mandates, then that...
Well, they have to be under informed consent.
Well, if we do not outlaw them, then informed consent and enforcing up to 4 exemptions would be an important part. And I believe if you can't outlaw them, if you can't get enough votes to completely outlaw them, then you need to make liability a big part of it, so that the corporation that forces the mandate puts liability on them for anything that happens in the future.
I heard OSHA already did that at the federal level, that they required that if a company mandates that you take the vaccine and you get a reaction to it, that they're legally liable for any damages to you.
I have not heard that, but I would be shocked, because OSHA is certainly going the other way.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do this since, and John will be here, Troy will be here after class. Doesn't it make you feel young to hear that? And you can ask him these questions, but you had one more thing to say.
This all came about because of Goshen County. We passed House Bill 127, which was basically Senate File 80 with Eric Barlow's name on it. I'm quite proud of that. And the Goshen County commissioners and health officers were deciding they were going to mask up students. And the parents from Goshen County showed up, 300 of them, angry. And this is why we need to keep building numbers, because they raised enough heck over all of it. And the state health officer said, wait a minute, as of July 1st, you don't have the authority to do this anymore. And if you do it, the state will sue you. So my point is, just keep getting the word out. Keep finding friends. Get as many people to these kind of meetings as you can and get them involved. And I got a whole packet for Susan Walter.
There you go.
On the
Thank
school
you.
board.
Thank you, Troy. It's very interesting because, you know, we're dealing with the library, and we both made it issues of socialism, and that's what this is. They're trying to move us into socialism. They really are, and they're doing it on steroids, and we've got to stand against them. I've asked Helen to just come. She has a couple of books that she wants to show you that are at the library that we're fighting against, and so I asked her to do this, and then we will be finished, I believe. Thank you, Helen. Where you can use that. Stand up here. The big desk.
I do have some books back there, and I'll put some more when I'm done. We need to pray for our city, God's city. Schools and libraries are pushing God out, pushing their agenda of sex and LGBTQ. The college, the newspaper, where's God? When was the last time you saw a Christian article?
Yeah.
What are they bringing to the table? We need pastors, churches, individuals to stand up for what's right, what the children are exposed to. Here's 2 books bought with penny power. Doing It. Let's talk about sex. Rainbow, a first book of pride.
And where are those at in the library?
The age group, yeah.
Well, this one's in the teens.
And the teen is for,
It says young adult, and that's what.
but we found out they're actually adult books for 19 to 25-year-olds. Yeah.
And then this one is in the children's, and it says it must have primer for young readers and a great gift for pride events and throughout the year. Beautiful colors all together make it Rainbow in Rainbow, a first book of pride. There's a sweet ode to rainbow families, an affirming display of a parent's love for their child and a child's love for their parents. With bright colors and joyful families, this book celebrates LGBTQ+ pride and reveals the colorful meaning behind each rainbow stripe. Readers will celebrate life, healing, sunlight, nature, harmony and spirit that the rainbows in this book will bring. And then there's this one. It's in the parental shelf in the children's department. I will put it back there. I'll even put this back there because it's Amazon's reviews of people's comments. And I was looking at it today because it shows the children how to have sex. And they're naked in here. So it's like a cartoon, but it shows them how to have sex. It shows them how the baby is being born. Children like to play house, so aren't they going to act what they see? And today I was reading, this is another one, pushing the LGBT. Cuddling together naked, man and woman, woman and woman, or man and man is called having sex. It's something about couples, or it's something adult couples do because they like it. This needs to go in the garbage, folks.
And that's
And wait.
what age group?
Like 4 to 10 or 4 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on the parental shelf, but it's where the children can still go get it, look at it, or check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, we need your help, because this is disgusting.
It's amazing, when you look at the books and what's in them and who they're for, you understand that this is an attack on the family. And that's, to get socialism, you have to break down the family. And the library has been doing this for quite a number of years. We kind of stumbled across it when they advertised Pride Month, and we haven't stopped since, because it's something we need to go after. We put up a website, which is cccwy.org. cccwy.org. Just rolls off the tongue, see? But you can, there's some more book reports and things like that you can look up. But this is definitely, we can see we're fighting socialism. And then the last thing, Mark Junick is involved, I believe, John, you're involved in this, bringing Sheriff Richard Mack to town. And so if we can quickly just announce this, and then we will close.
Thank you, Ed, for pointing this out, but I have a very recent and important update. You know, or maybe you don't know, but anyway, Sheriff Mack was going to come to 3 communities in the states. He brought us Gillette and Rapid City, and it was a short, kind of a short time frame. Brought us Rapid City people, both are all. We were getting things together for the short time frame. Brought us Rapid City people. Wanted more time. We postponed, and we're planning on November 30th now. So
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
if you know, if any of you know who Sheriff Richard Mack is, I can, don't have it with me, but I've bio and training information speaking on, well, his theme on the flyers, the county sheriff, America's last best hope, and talks about training. He trains on the Constitution and upholding the Constitution.
CSPOA.
CSPOA is his organization.
You've heard of the constitutional.
November 30.
You've heard of the constitutional counties. I believe there's 2 of them in Nevada, and there's one now in New York. And they're going to practice, you know, they're going to follow the Constitution.
He's very busy now speaking and training all over the country.
Yes. Susan?
Please remind people to sign up for the boards and come to the board meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, there's information over there on the board meetings, and you can go to these board meetings. There's public comment, and you can speak what's on your heart, uphold the Constitution, use your voice, and we're grateful to those that are on the library boards and the senior boards and so forth that are constitutionalists. But we want to see more of that. I really believe this. The Constitution is a solution. Several years ago, I went to Lyle and I said, we got to start doing these classes again, because we're falling behind, and we can't allow ourselves to fall behind. So if you can, next meeting, make sure you bring a few people. We're going to talk about the wars and the constitutionality of the wars that have been happening, and Lyle's going to take that class. And it should be very, very interesting. We have a lot of neocons running around and wanting wars, and so we're going to try to understand what the Constitution says about war. And so we thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate you coming. Yes, Mark?
You know, the speaker in the video, I'm afraid, sorry, I don't remember his name. It talked about Larry McDonald, Congressman Larry McDonald. I didn't remember who he was, so I had to look him up. But he was from Georgia. He was a passenger on KAL flight. Was it 007 that was shot down by Soviet interceptors in 1983.
Well, they dieseled them too.
Sorry. And you got a phone call.
Sorry. You can find some posts here. In fact, there's a new story in the news.
He was dieseled, and then he went to Jonestown and proved that Jonestown was a big CIA operation. His aide was killed, and he found that half those people had been hunted down and shot with an M16.
Wow. Yep.
And then
Awesome.
he was killed.
Awesome guy, though. Also, if you get a chance, you all know Scott Clem. He preached a sermon on Sunday about the Black Robe Regiment. I listened to it. You'll just be absolutely enthralled at what he has to say. Totally constitutional, a real constitutional sermon.
Where can we find that?
You can find that Central Baptist Church. He's the pastor, and I believe they have a YouTube,
Facebook
YouTube
page.
and a Facebook.
Because I
So,
have him personally on.
yes, and please listen to that. Very, very good message.
Why do we think, why are our pastors in this community? I know yourself and Scott Clem are both speaking out, very vocal.
Yes.
Why are the rest of our pastors in our churches not speaking out?
Well, Scott, in his message, he covers that. And I see the money, and that's one thing that, if people get offended, then they don't give. And they're afraid the church is going to go under. That's one thing. But then we've been taught as pastors for years and years, don't touch the government, and we had the Johnson Amendment, and everybody was afraid about the Johnson Amendment, and the IRS would come after their tax-exempt status, and just all fear-based. And so the Alliance Defending Freedom encourages pastors to preach against the government and to send the messages, or against a candidate and send it to the IRS. And as of yet, the IRS hasn't litigated against any of the pastors. So it's been an unfounded fear for years, and we have to rise up. We have to. We're losing our republic, and the Black Robe Regiment initially came out and taught the people, to go to bear arms and go to war and to come against the tyranny, and we've lost that, and we got to get that back. John, yes.
They say that a lot of them are afraid because if you tell the truth or something, you might get names called. You might be called a name.
Yeah. People.
In Homeland Security said you're a terrorist if you believe in the Constitution.
People don't like to be called names. They call you hater. They call you, especially they use that.
So
and nobody likes to be called a hater, John, right?
Land of the brave, home of the free, and we're afraid to speak the truth. What's wrong with that?
But you know what? I learned very young
You
that
gotta
sticks
go.
and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. So the names won't hurt you. But thank you. Troy will be here. John will be here to answer some questions if you have them. And thank you all for coming. Next time when you come, bring 2 or 3 people with you. Good night.
Thank you. I'd like to know what's going on by your authority. We'll be talking at the time.
All I know is from Colleen. She was trying to shut that down, so that's the last I knew.